This show and all the content on All About Beer is able to come to you each week, thanks to the companies that support our journalism through advertising. If your company is thinking about 2023 media plans, we have options for every budget. Email info@allaboutbeer.com to learn more. And thanks for the support in keeping us on air and online. Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. From the hop fields of Germany to creating a non-alcoholic brew that creates true hop experiences, Jeff O'Neill of Industrial Arts is here to talk about his impressive brewery and the evolution of craft. And we're going to get into it all in just a moment. But first, All About Beer is back online, and it's producing original content for beer enthusiasts and professionals. Go visit allaboutbeer.com to see the latest. And if you want to support us in that endeavor, we've set up a Patreon for both readers and professional companies in the beer space. Check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer to learn more. And for additional audio content, go search All About Beer on your podcast platform of choice. You can listen to the shows that are now available, including Brewer to Brewer, the All About Beer podcast, and Beer Travelers. We're able to bring you this show each week, thanks to the companies that support independent journalism in the beer space. You can learn more about our surprisingly affordable rates by simply emailing info@allaboutbeer.com. And speaking of that, this episode is brought to you by Pro Brewer. We're bringing original articles to probrewer.com twice a week, covering issues important to the beer industry and ones that are aimed at helping breweries of all sizes understand the different facets of the business. Check out our articles on probrewer.com every Tuesday and Thursday, and visit the site daily for other original content and to stay connected with the beer industry. A few months ago, I was visiting Industrial Arts, which is a brewery in New York's Hudson Valley, to record a few episodes of Steal This Beer. Jeff O'Neill, the brewery's founder and brewmaster, was walking us through his impressive 100 hectoliter system, while also sharing a sneak peek of some non-alcoholic beers he was working on. This week, those beverages are hitting the marketplace, and so it seemed fitting to have him on the show to talk about the evolution and the process. And we'll get to that later on in the show. But first, we're going to get into that brewing system, and he'll illustrate how it was constructed to benefit his IPAs, which are honestly some of the very best being made in America right now, and how that even extends into the fields. He's a member of the Hop Quality Group and spent time in Germany around the harvest this year and shares his observations and insights from walking those farms. Jeff, as you'll hear, is a thoughtful brewer. His career spanned more than 20 years, and he's worked at a number of breweries on both coasts before opening Industrial Arts about 6 years ago. From where it was at the start to where it is now is impressive to hear. And before we got started with this recording, he said he doesn't spend too much time brewing these days, but rather stands on the brew deck and points and tells stories. So that's where we start, with an extended index finger and this tale of modern engineering. Here's our conversation.
Minute ago you said from the brew deck,
yeah,
and I made the joke that they don't let me on the brew deck anymore, but it's not really true. I go on the brew deck and point at things,
and then you tell stories,
and then I tell stories about those things.
Back in my day, or are these stories that you tell about your very impressive brand new brew house, which I got to tour a couple months ago, and all of the tricks and the bells and whistles and the how you frustrated the German engineers with your exacting demands?
They were never frustrated. They were just challenged.
Let's start there then. What were the challenges? For those who are unfamiliar, let's just the top overview of your Cadillac isn't even a fair comparison because
that's not a German car.
It's not a German car, but it's so much nicer than a Cadillac.
Because it's not an American car.
Okay.
The fundamental disconnect is that Germans know just about everything about brewing other than how to make IPA. And I don't think they'll disagree with me on that. And the biggest challenge was in scaling our existing recipes from 25 hectoliters to 100. we wound up with really large hop dosing rates that were out of whack with their default approaches. But they were all about solutions to that. And the biggest single adjustment, change, or departure that we made from our original plan was that this brew house, I think you'll remember this, does not have a whirlpool like virtually every other single brew house in the world of this size would.
Yeah.
That we have a conical sedimentation tank that works on somewhat different principles than a whirlpool. And that was their solution to our recipe challenge that we presented with them, which is a wort that we make, our flagship wort, that has no hop pellets added until after the boil is finished and the temperature is knocked down to about 80 C rather than 100. We add, do it in metric, something like 2 kilos per heck of pellets to our wort at that point. And when they saw those values, I think their eyes just about popped out of their heads. Like that usage rate does not appear in a textbook on brew house construction, which they are, and they're familiar with all of those publications.
Yeah.
And they had not seen a project asking for this before, and they came back with this differently conceived vessel that they've used for. They've used it a couple of times in other brew houses, but not for hops. So,
what were they using it for previously?
That's not really clear to me, but I'm assuming that it is for a yield, like just a yield increase in a I don't know, a beer. This is a firm that makes the biggest brew houses in the world. It's Steinecker, and they probably build up to 2,000 hectoliter brew houses, and they put them all over the world. And the impression that I got was that they had put some of these in some of their developing parts of the world where they've had projects, and it's usually because the inputs are so expensive. The fermentable, whatever the cereals are that they use, are so sometimes hard to get to these remote sites that they have no choice but to squeeze every last bit out of them. And this was a way that seemed to translate to our needs too. And long story short, it does. We get terrific yields, and we think it has some other benefits too to flavor.
Like what?
And I'm sorry I didn't explain this to your listeners. In a whirlpool, you're creating centrifugal force that moves the solids to the center of the vessel, and the vessel is a wide, flat, round tank. And it collects the trub pile there in the center. And it typically, when you make a really nice trub pile in a well-designed brew house, it's sort of a cone of mostly hop pellets, but some other proteins and solids that have carried through the process. And then you decant the liquid off of that pile, typically from the side of the vessel. But the whole time that you're doing that decanting, you're pumping out to your fermentation cellar and cooling through a heat exchanger. The wort is there sitting on those solids, whether they're hops or proteins or whatever. But specifically with hops, you are risking extracting more of the polyphenols and more of the plant matter.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on that in a typical process, maybe 45 minutes to an hour before you've collected all the fermentable wort. And here, rather than decanting the liquid off of the solids, you're eliminating the solids it's a cone, and the solids sink into the cone, and then we dump the solids to the drain, rather than the other way around, which is pour essentially pouring the liquid off of the solid. We're removing the solid and taking some of that risk out. And it's always, I try to stress this when I'm pointing at it and telling the story, it's always a for better or worse proposition. Like, we just think we're able to make a different wort than just about anybody else using a lot of very similar inputs. Like, we're all making hazy IPAs with Citra and Mosaic. We like to think that we are extracting the purest expression of those ingredients that we're putting in, and just the fractions that we want, and not some of the other stuff that can come along with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated by this because, you're right. Everybody's making Citra Mosaic IPAs these days, but yours do stand out. I think flavor wise, where there's a richness and a vibrancy at the same time in the beers that you make. And I'm wondering where, I mean, so much of that is a brewer's expression, right? You can have the right tools and you can have a beautiful brew house made to your specifications, but so much of that is driven by what you wanted these beers to be. And with this system in mind and what you were just saying, how is your thought evolution developed with the expression of hops that you want in your beers?
That's a great question. I mean, we came into this knowing that we celebrated our 6th anniversary this past summer. But we came into this project with a lot of experience beforehand. And we knew we wanted to use as many different hop products as we could for most of our beers in order to create that depth of flavor. So even if we're making what is ordinarily a very typical at this point recipe, and let's just say it's barley and wheat and oats and Citra and Mosaic and some Cascade, right, for good measure.
Sure.
We are using multiple lots of Citra and Mosaic, multiple lots and different products. Like we might use the standard T90 pellet for one of the additions. With Citra, we might use T45 in the sedimentation tank, and then it might be a cryo product in the dry hop. So you have Citra, but it's 3 different Citras that are all bringing some part of Citra's personality to the party, but in their own way. So you might have, between the Citra and Mosaic, you might have 6 different actual products going in. And then forgive me because I left out what I think is one of the really critical things to the way we develop the flavor in our worts is a hop back after that vessel. So everything that we're collecting there in the sedimentation tank and then sending out to fermentation is then going through another step, which is showering down through a bed of whole. And this is where we typically add the Cascade. That wort then showers down through another filter bed of a quarter bale of Cascade, which is 50 pounds, and gives it yet another layer of character.
Okay. And
again, I always phrase it as, it's a for better or worse thing, because there we're actually sort of contrary to what I was suggesting earlier. There we are intentionally trying to pick up some of the plant character, some of the vinousness and sort of, I don't want to say coarseness, but some of the mouthfeel that can come along with that, and some of that real fine aroma that is like rubbing the actual raw material in your hands, which is a special treat that most brewers, most brewers worth their salt do as often as possible, but something that most of your audience maybe has never had the opportunity to do, which is to say, use not an unprocessed form of the ingredient, but a minimally processed form, which is just the dried and baled flowers.
Right.
So we've made a point of that. And as much as we like cryo and T90 and flowable stuff, and all of the really later developments in hop products, there's nothing like that raw material. It's very ephemeral. It's very hard to keep in the product.
Yeah.
So we think that final step is really important to the way we develop flavor in our work before fermentation. And then, of course, a whole nother process starts once fermentation begins. And we think it's really important how and when we dry hop to get that, what we now, I think all agree, the biotransformation is a big part of what the most successful hazy brewers are doing. And we have, developed our own timing and techniques for doing that. But it's very distinctly a hot side the everything that happens in the cellar is predicated on successful extraction on the hot side.
Have you seen a change in consumer preference over the last couple of years, now that hazy New England, insert whatever style name here, has really sort of captured, it is obviously running the show for smaller brewers these days, and it does have great crossover appeal for a lot of drinkers. But when you just mentioned, like the ones that do it well, have you noticed a consumer shift in the last, year or two of people flocking to your beers, or even some of those other?
I wish I had noticed it more.
Okay. But that consumers are now paying attention to. I know not everybody gets to do hop rubbings, but are you hearing feedback of people who get that what they're drinking is a little bit more special than something that was just kind of slapped together in the back room?
I think we do, but it's a biased. We're hearing that over our tap room bar, and we're hearing that in Instagram messages, and it's a captive audience. So you mostly hear that the praise like that is usually from someone who is converted and understands, or has just learned from one of our bartenders or something.
Okay.
What we're doing that's different, but we do make a point of making sure that our team is armed with these talking points, like this is different. We do have steps in our process that virtually no one else does, and we feel like they're important to executing the beers that we want to make. And I don't think that that's any different if you go to the brewery down the street. I think they have their own critical control points, the things that they think are their own, maybe not intellectual property, but proprietary ideas or real specific things that they do. Your successful brewers that people are talking about and wanting to try their beers are all doing something a little bit different than everybody else. So it's necessary. It's totally necessary to have a point of difference. When, like we sort of qualified coming in, there's a lot of beers with very similar intent and very similar ingredient profiles. Making them stand out from each other is a challenge when there's 10,000 people, 10,000 teams making really similar products. But I feel like when someone like you indicates that they can perceive that difference, we've done our job. So I think that's great.
Oh, shucks. Um, should there be a need, or could drinkers benefit from a more, I don't want to say streamlined process, because that's not fair, but you're pretty forthcoming with information on how you make your beer, and which is great and refreshing, because there are people who have, the proprietary stuff that they don't necessarily want to talk about. But I'm thinking back to some of those early days of craft where it's, rising tide raises all boats kind of thing.
Mm-hmm,
and there's still
mm-hmm.
a lot of middling beer that exists out there, especially in the hazy category. And I'm wondering if there could be, I want to talk about the hop quality group in a second, because I know you're part of that. But is there something that could be process wise put out there where it's, hey, we are the leaders in this field, and this is what we've seen that works, and everybody deserves better beer, and here's how you can do it on a small scale? Is there something to be said for, I don't know, better
Codifying
defining
that?
process?
Yeah, I think we're all in the, I think that's happening. I think there's more research being done in these areas all the time. And certainly your national brands and and I'm privy to some of this information through the hop quality group. We know for sure that the bigger craft brewers have, real R&D laboratories, and they are really quantifying, for instance, the markers they want to see for aromas in a hop variety. And they can take a sample and run it through a GC, and they can see where the spikes are, where the characteristics of the individual hop varieties differentiate from each other. And they can use, science to get better at selecting their ingredients. And of course, like the gag that I want to say is, sure, I'm transparent about how we travel to the ends of the earth to get the best ingredients that we can. And I would encourage everybody to do that. But if you can't, it's a little harder. Like, so if you're talking about, the neighborhood brewery that just opened in the last couple of years, or maybe just before the pandemic, they don't necessarily have the relationships in place or the resources to go to the farms in Yakima for a week, or even, beyond that to the Hallertau where we just were.
Yeah.
So it's the same old gag as like, sure, I'm a overnight 20 years overnight success story, right? It's there aren't a ton of secrets. And the hop quality group that you mentioned there, like, you basically summarize the mission statement. It's like, we have changed how we use this ingredient. We're using it late in the process. We're in many or most cases now, we're skipping the traditional kill step that is part of the hot side of brewing, and we're adding, unforeseen, heretofore-seen quantities of hops to these fermentations. Like, there are brewers out there adding 5 pounds of hops a barrel, maybe more, into their fermenters. And there's risks associated with that, especially as pertains to food quality. And, the main mission of the group is to treat this ingredient like food, not like a commodity, and not like a brick of, I don't know, of plant material. It's food. And we want to make sure that the bar is raised on the quality, and make sure that that we've standardized what kind of oils people are using on their conveyor belts, and just make sure that everything is safe and fit and in the highest quality that it can be. It's pretty straightforward, and it's a group of, real forward thinking brewers who founded this.
Yeah.
This this organization. Um,
and the evolution of the hop quality group, which I've talked with other folks on the show about that. I think it's been to the whole benefit of of everybody who enjoys beer, not just producers, but drinkers as well.
And that's like, and we can see it in real time happening from annual visit to annual visit. When we go back to these same farms, I've been visiting hop farms since 2008. And even over that time, you've seen a sea change in the capabilities and the tech that even the data collection, and the same thing you see behind the scenes in a sophisticated brewery. The best growers are using quantitative and qualitative data to grow better hops. In the same way that these big brewers that have resources and large market share, they're using this very similar tools to make great beer.
Yeah.
Play to their strengths. Really, it's figure out how to play to your strengths. And a farm is a certain geographical place, and some of it has more water and some of it has more sun. And you might learn that you want to pick Simcoe a couple of days earlier, or you want to pick Mosaic a couple of days later, and you can't know that without collecting the data from harvest to harvest. And that's been a really interesting thing to see happen, is the farmers, and I don't want to it's certainly not any kind of criticism, but not sure that the tradition was always to think about it as a food product.
Mm. Where do you think that they were thinking of it? Just as just straight up agricultural product?
Yeah, and again,
or a commodity.
Yeah, like a commodity. And I think that's largely, it used to, the whole trade used to be controlled by a small group of brokers who they would go in and rate the quality of any given farm, and they didn't have the same analytical driven approach that brewers might. And the brokers were trying to get the best price from the farmers so they could make the most money from their brewer customers. And there was an opacity there between those tiers in a way that's maybe not that different from the tradition of beer distribution in America. But that it was a much smaller group of people controlling supply, and now it's more crowdsourced, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Like there's more, the internet has connected us all, and brewers have a louder voice, as do the farmers. And I think it's benefited the whole stack.
So I was thinking about how you were saying that that the Germans that designed your brew house, they rose to the challenges. And with the hop quality group, you were in Germany this year going through hectolitre. How are those farmers? How is the German hop industry rising to the challenges of today?
Oh gosh. I don't even know where to start with that. Climate change is so
welcome
real
to the
there.
Thunderdome. Yeah.
Climate change is, I just want to clarify here. I'm going to speak from, I went to the Hallertau on behalf of the hop quality group.
Okay.
So the things I'm going to say here are going to be my opinion and only my opinion.
Okay.
Because I'm unable to have anything other than my opinion.
Of course.
But I did go there as a representative.
You're not speaking on behalf of the larger.
I am not. But I will give you some high level observations.
Okay.
And number one is that climate change is incredibly real there, in a way that it's the first thing that we talked about. I visited 12 or 13 farms, and it was the first thing at every farm. They had the hottest summer in decades. They don't have water like we do in the Northwest. The heirloom landrace varieties that they grow, that a brewer like me thinks are really important to make an accurate representation of some of these classic styles. Varieties like Hallertau Mittelfrüh are very much at risk. They don't yield as well or nearly as well in this climate as some of the later, more recently bred varieties. So for the last number of years there, maybe a decade or more, they've been acutely aware of climate change in a way. Like, it's just like they're not debating whether there's climate change in Germany. There is. And that's sort of a difference that I see at a fundamental level, is that here we've got two Americas that believe two different things. And, the truth is somewhere in between, but climate change is real. So they are really worried because in general, these are farms that have been growing these varieties for like maybe 300 or 400 years, like 10, 12, 15 generations, farming the same fields. And there's not more land. They can't move over to Idaho. They can't move over to, they can't just like keep growing outward. They have to grow. They have to yield a sustainable amount off of a limited amount of acreage. So the fundamental difference is that where there are maybe 40 or so farms in Washington, Washington and the Hallertau grow roughly the same. Maybe Washington and Germany grow roughly the same volume of hops. In Washington State, there are 40 or so. And again, don't crucify me if I get these numbers slightly wrong, but I'm close. And maybe there are 11 or 1,200 farms in Germany growing that same amount. So the farms are very much family run, family held, 3 generations working together. And what we saw a lot was the 20 or 30-ish generation. And it's more male dominated there than we see here. So it's typically the youngest son, and the father is, if the son is 30-ish, the father is close to retirement age. And then wouldn't you know it, in most of these settings, the grandfather was there still tinkering with a tractor or whatever. Yeah. So you're seeing this like generational transition. These older generations, they grew up as farmers. They didn't necessarily go to university beyond high school. But the younger generation has been educated and understands the science of agriculture. I think, more and more each generation. And they're very much in tune with the real challenges. And they have this energy crisis there that was the second
that was topic. The second thing that they brought up.
Yeah. And their fuel costs have gone up 300% this season versus last. And the yields are down because of the heat. And most of them were talking about hoping to break, like their best scenario was to break even this year.
Jesus.
And these are small farms that don't, I don't know. They've owned the land again for centuries. But their whole family's, livelihood depends on this crop.
Right.
This, 3 or 4 weeks of picking. And I think, it's not the first off year they've had, but but at each stop that grandfather would say it was the worst year he'd ever seen. And we go to the research and development labs and test plots and greenhouses, and they are just united, several different parallel breeding programs. They're all it's the same thing. It's too hot. We don't have the inputs are getting more and more expensive, and we need to breed varieties that will grow in this changed climate and without water. And those are not necessarily the noble hops that we know and love from our experiences. So there's an existential question about these traditional varieties, and I heard different opinions, like in 10 years there will be none of these. Sort of everything from that to no, this will still exist, but you'll have to pay 3 or 4 times as much, which again just breaks the model. It breaks the model for the brewer. So there's some shared pain points, and it's a lot of this. I think you and I have talked about this before. Like these last couple of years, I've never felt, and maybe this is a universal thing at this point, like my life was ripped from the headlines so much, right? Like you read about climate change in Europe and drought in Europe, and then I go there and I see it firsthand, and it's super real.
Yeah.
I think I told you last time you visited that when that ship was stuck in the Suez Canal,
Right.
that was blocking some cans that we needed. It's like this thing with, inflation when you're reading about it, and people able to leave their manual labor jobs and make 25% more at a new job on Monday. Like we're seeing all that happen in real life.
Yeah.
So there's a certain, I don't know, shared experience that was really interesting to talk about with these farmers who certainly have a different perspective on the supply chain than I do.
I mean, it's amazing to think that there are, farmers and folks who are saying like 10 years from now, we might not have what we've been so used to in having in beer, forever. Some of these varieties, some of these, this critically important ingredient.
Yeah.
And as much as I would like to, say like, oh, that'll never happen. This is the darkest timeline. And
yeah, we're living it. I mean, I don't want to come on your show and be the most cynical person you've ever had on here, but we saw it's
a game of inches at this point. But yeah,
it does lead to progress sometimes, of course. Like there's this terrific success story in Germany of this variety called Hercules.
Mm-hmm.
And Hercules, and I've always thought of it just as a bittering hop. We have never reached for it ourselves because there are bittering hops grown here in the US that are more accessible and maybe less expensive and do the job. Right. But Hercules is like this economically like super viable thing specifically for these farmers. And it's partly because they have a different clientele at the end of the day. Like American craft brewers are not the bread and butter of the Hallertau, believe it or not. I was shocked to learn this myself.
What?
Yeah. We are not the most important thing that they've ever heard of.
Weird.
They are suppliers to the global brewing industry, which is super, old school and makes beer. Like they're not making IPA.
Right.
They're making lager. They're making industrial lager all over the world. Most of the beer consumed in the world is still this thing. And they typically, these brewers want kilos of alpha, right? So they just want the enough bitterness to offset the malt character, balance the malt character of their products. And they don't care if the guy at the picker is smoking a cigarette and ashing onto the floor, and there's they're going to boil the hell out of everything that comes their way.
Right.
So it's a different, just a different perspective, not right or wrong. So these concerns that have really just come up in the last decade or so here, where brewers have gotten more aligned and united, asking for the suppliers to recognize these important points in the process. We saw this, in the early 2000s, and before that, we had a much more limited palette to paint with. We had C hops and we had a little bit of Simcoe. We had, some aroma varieties that were specifically American, but it was, Cascade and Chinook and Centennial, and not a ton else. And we've seen a tremendous effort in breeding and product development here to drive these newer aroma characteristics, fruitiness, and tropical characteristics. And, it used to be we loved Sierra Nevada because it was a little bit orangey. And now you see people talking about, now you see brewers, Instagrams talking about lychee fruit. I have never had lychee fruit. I had my first. Oh,
you haven't lived. You haven't lived.
I had my first gooseberry like 2 weeks ago, John.
like for real or in an IPA?
For real.
Oh, okay.
Like the first time I knew I was eating a gooseberry, it was really good. It looked like a little cherry tomato.
I don't know if I've ever had a gooseberry.
See, but have you ever described a beer as having gooseberry character?
No. I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
I'm glad.
I can't. Well, because I don't know what it tastes like. I don't.
At his house. Oh shit.
He's got it. He's got a whole grove. He's got a whole grove of them. In an undisclosed
No, I mean, so you know what I'm saying,
somewhere.
right? Like we used to have a much more limited palette. This month from where I was observing this other industry in this other country, they're going through they're at the beginning of a correction that we've just gone through maybe in the last 10 years, where there's an audience seeking a different qualities from a traditional product, using them and using these ingredients in different ways than they have traditionally. And that takes some time to filter through the supply chain. And the supply chain, as you have probably seen, is fairly busted right now. So we're trying to battle some of those challenges with increased communication. And I think it always comes down to that. Like we all are in the same business. We all want the same thing at the end of the day, which is tasty beer that customers will pay for, because that's ultimately, that's ultimately why you have a podcast.
Yes. I just looked it up while we were talking just to see. Gooseberry gets a mention in the Craft Brewery Cookbook, my latest book, and it's in the wine section of the book that Lauren Buzzio wrote. Mm-hmm. So I have never actually used the word, and she used it as a descriptor for some New Zealand. Yeah. So no,
I said it
I've
first,
never,
right? I didn't. I said it before you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's in New Zealand. Specifically, it gets mentioned in New Zealand varieties, Nelson, Motueka.
Yeah. There's nothing on the search of all of my hard drives. The only gooseberry mention comes from that particular chapter in the book. You mentioned some of the larger breweries, and I want to keep talking about Germany a little bit, but it's interesting now that you are thinking about some of these macro forces and what they want, which is different from what you want in the hop quality group, and certainly what you want for your brewery. And while I think there's always been this narrative of us versus them, or David Goliath, or et cetera, there's also been a settling in the last couple of years of people understanding what macro is, people understanding what craft is, or independent, or small, whatever, and just kind of coexisting.
Yeah, maybe? I thought maybe nobody cared anymore.
Yeah,
I kind of hope nobody cared anymore. No, I don't quite mean that.
I know, but when you start talking about crops now, and you start talking about hops as a food product or not, just as a commodity, it sort of brings that conversation, I don't know, to a deeper level, to a new level, a different level. I don't really quite know, but it seems to be there's new things to be thinking about, especially under the auspices of what you were learning in Germany.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, there's a commonality, of course. And I don't mean any of what I say to denigrate global brewers. I mean, they are many steps ahead of most.
No, you said they're
craft
putting out their
brewers.
Marlboro Lights in alpha acid hops. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I was afraid that was what you heard. They have.
I almost made a route beer
different
joke when you said it, but then
they have they
restrained myself.
they have different priorities and different drivers, and they're not, they have a different market. And that distinction that we're trying to make as tiny little players in a global game that is beholden to market forces, which I'm learning more and more as we have scaled up, to around the 25,000 barrel size. Like some of these market forces insulate us from wild swings. Some of them limit us from growth, and some of them have benefited us at times. And I think like we're all swimming in the same stream, and you can only go against the current for so long and to so much success.
I want to, go ahead.
No, I sensed dead air there, so I was going to tag something on, but
no, tag on.
No, and I was just going to say something like, and ultimately at the end of the day, we all want a healthy market for, what is still the world's favorite alcoholic beverage. So there's more alignment. I mean, I think there's more alignment than not at the end of the day.
It's fitting that pause was dramatic effect, gravitas before a new question. That's what I was. I certainly wasn't playing solitaire on my computer. Because
you were Googling lychee fruit. Right?
I was trying to figure out where I can get fresh gooseberries because I don't want any frozen in the house.
I mean, have you ever had actual passion fruit?
Yes.
I'm not sure I have.
Okay.
Had passion fruit juice. I don't think I've ever had it fresh.
Okay. Yeah, well, see, now I'm doubting myself. Like I don't have a specific memory of eating passion. I've certainly had it in juiced form, but I imagine on travel.
I mean, the most honest. I think the most honest flavor. I'm digressing now, but I think the most honest flavor descriptors we see is like watermelon Jolly Rancher.
Yeah.
Or peach ring candy. It's just interesting. And I guess the point I was trying to make is a generation ago, we would say, oh, this tastes like oranges, or maybe even tangerines, which are exotic oranges. Right. And now we've got this whole nother level of vocabulary, which is great as long as you are familiar with the definitions of each of the things.
Well, I mean, I have sat down over the last couple of years, and we're lucky. We have a really great produce store not too far from me, and I'll go in and just buy stuff and cut it up, and I'll eat the pith, eat the skin or the rind, just to try to understand the different parts of it. And that's been exceptionally helpful with citrus of everything from grapefruit and oranges, but different types of oranges to
that's great.
Certainly tangerines and things like that, because I do like that descriptor. But I mean, you bring up a great point with gooseberry of there are, people who will say, oh yeah, no, you really get the gooseberry out of it. But how many people are actually eating those, or how many people are eating fresh, yuzu fruit, or Buddha's hand,
that was on the tip of my tongue.
I mean, there's all these different things out there. You mentioned when we were talking about some of the macro guys that beer is still the most popular alcoholic beverage. You are now firmly in the non-alcoholic space.
Oh yeah. We just I wouldn't say firmly. We've launched a non-alcoholic line of beers this week, so it's sort of tenuous today. But we're really excited about it, and we've been working on that for a full year internally to get it to the point where we were even close to comfortable putting it in the market. And it's been a really fascinating experience, very challenging, because I think a lot of our preconceptions about what we do are couched in the inherent safety of beer. This old adage about beer being safe, was safer to drink than water through lots of recorded history, because of even the smallest amount of alcohol killing almost all of the known pathogens that could live in something like that. So that is not the case with non-alcoholic, specifically non-alcoholic beer style beverages. And this is the thing, like the vocabulary has, in like so many of the phenomena of today and tomorrow and the past, even vocabulary doesn't get there as fast as the product maybe does. We are stuck using beer terms as this, like we're calling it non-alcoholic beer. It is not beer. The definition of beer is that it's alcoholic. So it's sort of there's a conflict there, and it's almost like carried through to a lot of our assumptions about how to make this product. Like all of our experiences rooted in beer, and we learned that leaves some significant amounts of risk for pathogens like listeria, like botulism, things that can make you pretty sick, very sick, maybe kill you. It's not, it's not to say that, non-alcoholic beer out at the store is not safe. I mean, give everybody the benefit of the doubt and say that they learned this stuff along the way, that you have to control your pH, and you have to pasteurize this, and you have to focus on putting something that is safe out there. That was not as obvious to us as I wish it had been, and it slowed us down. But also we had a lot of supply chain challenges with this, which honestly bought us some time to work through some of the things that go on in the background to make sure that what we're doing is relatively free from health risk for anyone. So it's been a very interesting process, and we're trying to stop. I'm digressing here, but the main point is we're doing all we can to stop saying beer when we talk about this product.
What are you trying to say then? So what's
beer? Well, we put several different things on the can itself. You're not allowed to say beer per the TTB and FDA. So for instance, the header is non-alcoholic brew. You can say IPA because that really means nothing. It's not you can't say India Pale Ale.
Right. But you can say IPA.
Ale. You can't use the word ale or lager or porter or stout or any of those like sort of idiosyncratically protected styles. So we say non-alcoholic brew, we say near beer, we say non-alcoholic brew again. And then in the side panel, we say cereal beverage, brewed and canned. Just to sort of check, it's been a moving target what the regulatory agencies are looking for. So we tried to hit all of the known compliance terms so that it is explicit that we are using the little acronym IPA because we think that will drive some sales. But then we have to be very careful to be sure no one thinks that it is actually an IPA that will deliver alcohol into their system. So it's interesting. You're saying one thing and then sort of undoing it with some of the other details that are here on the label. I'm looking at it right now, which is
all right. So there's a lot I want to ask you about this then.
Yes, sorry.
The first one being, why walk down this path?
It's a great question. I was on vacation last summer of 21, and I was trying to be unplugged for a few days. And I got a couple of voicemails from my main wholesaler partner. This is the wholesaler that we probably sell 75% of our beer through, and they represent us, and us in a big part of our territory, not just in New York, but
so that's a call you take when you're on vacation. Yeah.
Well, I could tell that he tried twice, right?
Okay.
So I remember exactly where I was when I called him back. I was at a post office, putting something in the mail, and I was in the parking lot because I didn't have good cell reception where I was. So I called him back, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he said, "Well, I want to ask you something. I don't even want to ask, but I figure I have to ask, and I gotta ask this." And I'm like, "Just tell me what?" And he says, would you consider making a non-alc?" And, I think I groaned when he said it. One of my partners, an investor who I don't even know very well, but has been in with us since day one, has peppered me with every article about athletic that's been published in the last 4 or 5 years. And he was ahead of the curve on this, a little bit older than me. And he would send me, a Vine Pair article about athletic tearing up the scene with non-alcoholic IPA. And he'd say, "Listen, I drink one wrench and one athletic and then another wrench and go to bed." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice. That's a cool story." We're focused on what we're doing. We're IPA brewers. It's working. And then we built this bigger brewery, right? We finished it last summer. We had just finished it actually before I took this call. And it's clear that we have, more capacity than I had ever imagined coming into this, and that this channel is developing. And just to get back to the phone call,
yeah,
I groaned and I said, "Why are you asking me?" And he's like, "Well, you're our number one supplier, and like we could really get behind it." And I start to see, you start just there to even see an opportunity. And then he tells this story and he says, full disclosure though, I turned down Athletic, and it's the worst decision I ever made. So when Athletic was shopping for wholesalers, they identified, they reached out. They said, we have this great idea. We're willing to spend behind it. And he basically said, "Hard pass." And he's like trying to undo this mistake, and to an extent. And just that admission there is something, when your wholesaler, I can only speak for myself, but when our wholesaler identifies an opportunity and says, "Gosh, I think my number one partner could really execute this well, and I'm willing to get behind it, spend behind it. I see this opportunity that we missed and can maybe capitalize on by working together on." Like it was compelling. It stood out to me, and at the same time, I'm not getting any younger, and I think maybe that week I was trying to drink less while I was on vacation, and I was like, maybe I'll try a couple of these, and I did, and I kind of finally got it as a 40-something-year-old man who's been eating and drinking for a living for a while.
Yep.
There are limits, right? And I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop enjoying our products. But for sure, there's a point at which you got to slow down, and this is a way to be faithful to the same sort of things we like. Like, we're really, really focused on the way the ingredients come through in these products, and the points of difference that we can make. And I really think that these first few batches, and again, we've made 20 different batches behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But these first few batches that we release are going to be the best non-alcoholic IPAs that most people have tried. The most faithful, the most reasonable IPA substitute
So
that you can find.
all right, so this is where I wanted to. You set this up perfectly, because I've as also a 40-something-year-old guy who eats and drinks for a living. I've been drinking a lot more non-alcoholic, and I've been much like your buddy or your partner. I'm substituting as well. I'll have 2 regular beers, and then I'll switch to NA just so I can get up the next morning. And I've been going for, I'll drink Athletic. I think they do a nice job. There's some others out there that I enjoy, but the Heineken one, I've been drinking because it tastes like Heineken. And I like the taste of Heineken. I don't, it's not a lot to it, but it's, but it tastes like a beer. Whereas when you were getting this project rolling and Augie and I were there for Steal This Beer, and you gave us Athletic beer, I knew exactly what it was, because there is a flavor to their beer that is not replicated in, or the flavor in their product. I'll try to stop saying beer.
Yeah. It's hard. It's a challenge.
Yeah. But there's a flavor in their product that is telltale, that does not show up in what I think of as traditional beer. It has this sort of unfermented wort taste to it.
I think you said tea-like in the moment.
Yes. Which is true. And so it's sort of telltale. So there's this thing where, for me, the Heineken tastes like Heineken, except it's got no booze. The Athletic tastes like Athletic, and I can say, sure, like, this has a hop content to it, or this is malty, this is nice, like, it's sort of reminiscent. But where is the line, or what are you striving for with yours? Where do you want people to in a blind test say, oh wow, this is a good hazy IPA? Or do you want them to say, wow, this is non-alcoholic and I can't believe it? Like, what?
We're not trying to gotcha anybody. That's for sure. I think we like that disclosure of it being non-alcoholic. That's the selling point. So we're not trying to.
But are the expectations that it should taste like a beer?
It's a great question. It's really hard to do, right?
Right.
And the reason why the Heineken and you probably have tried the Guinness one.
I have.
So those start as actual Heineken and actual Guinness, right?
Right.
And then they are run through dialysis filtration or some kind of reverse osmosis that removes the alcohol from the product. It takes some of the other stuff with it, not just the alcohol. And that equipment requires massive investment, like you can't imagine, maybe.
Yeah.
And Athletic is fairly tight-lipped about how they make their product.
Yeah.
But there's only a couple of ways to do it. And we think our approach is more like theirs than like Heineken's. I'll say that.
Okay.
What we are trying to do with the IPA specifically is communicate the hop aroma, right? Which is for my money is the thing that differentiates IPA from every other beer. It starts with how it smells. And it's very difficult to maintain a strong hop aroma through the process of pasteurization.
Yeah.
You have to cook these cans after they're filled. And if you're dry hopping like you would a beer, you're gonna add at that step is going to change the profile of the product. Skew it more bitter, most likely.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of these, what do we like to call them? Advanced hop products. There's some new flowable liquids that are only, I'm just going to spitball here, only have the beta acids or are already isomerized or don't turn bitter. And this is, I think that day we drank the Lagunitas one as well. Do you remember?
Yeah, maybe.
I think we had the IPNA.
Yeah.
And that one has very distinctive hop aroma. And knowing what I know, you only really get that aroma with one of these. Like, it's not the raw hop. It's an extract that is made stable by some laboratory process. This is not a knock. I think it's remarkable.
No, I get it. I know. Yeah.
But we think that, I'll agree with you. I don't think Athletics IPA has a lot of hop presence. So we see space to riff on that and bring a little bit more of that. People, obviously, it looks like their number one SKU is their IPA. That tracks with everything else that goes on in craft beer. And we perceived that there was space for a more expressive non-alc IPA. And we think that some of those same tools that we have in our brew house to make stable aroma in the wort that we use to make beer also gives us a point of difference in the non-alc field, where we are making those stable aroma compounds on the hot side that then can survive that pasteurization step. So that's where we see our point of difference is, we're not trying to make and this is a question I've heard a bunch. We're not trying to make non-alcoholic wrench. We're trying to make the best non-alcoholic expression of IPA that we can. Because to do it, it's, if we were a company of the scale of a Guinness or a Heineken, with a flagship like Guinness or Heineken, there would be an intrinsic demand for a non-alcoholic version of exactly that beer. And those two brands have done a remarkable job of executing that. But here we think there's more white space for a new product that doesn't have to exactly mirror or mimic something we're already doing.
Yeah. So it complements rather than acts as a replacement.
Yeah, it's in a sweet spot for us. And then that's the trick with everybody's business, I think, whether it's in our industry or some other one that I know nothing about. You got to play up your strengths and downplay your deficiencies. And this is something that we can do really well.
I dig it. And it's out now.
It's out now. Yeah, we just launched it in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut last week. Pennsylvania will get it. Pennsylvania, we shipped some yesterday to Pennsylvania, so it should be hitting shelves by the end of the week there. It'll be in New England before very long, and upstate New York next week as well.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I'm bearing the lead here. We also have a Pils style that we are canning tomorrow. The first batch that we will release is getting canned tomorrow. And that is maybe more beery, like more just like beer. And we're sort of going after two different drinkers here. One is the crusty old hophead who for whatever reason, I don't want to, again, it's like I want to destigmatize this because I think it's happening organically. It's like sobriety is, there's something cool about sobriety now.
Yeah.
And I think it's happening.
I'm not laughing at
you know what I'm saying, right?
No,
it's
I
weird.
do.
It's like, it's great. I mean, it's great. And as a father of kids who are coming of age, like, these kids are different today. They're not trying to party. Like my 11th grader now, he's not sneaking out of the house. He's not doing crazy things.
That sounds like you just didn't do your job right.
It's just a different time, and people have a disposable income that they, in a lot of cases, maybe less so today than last year, but they have a budget that is earmarked for good food and drink, maybe. Yeah. And an occasion where they can't drink today, whether it's because they have to go pick up their kids at soccer or I don't know, on a medication or just need, to your point, just need to get up early tomorrow morning, but don't want to drink just water or seltzer or soda or something. They want something that's more in line with their taste preferences. And there's a market for this today.
Yeah.
And I understand it better as a consumer than I did, 5 years ago.
No, I'm enjoying it for all the reasons that you just said as well. And just, it's nice to have these alternatives. And for one, if I want to drink like an NA beer, it doesn't taste like a punishment or that, and then, being able to get up and be productive the next day is also enormously helpful.
And I'll say, just to tie it back a little bit into this Germany trip.
Yeah.
Every brewery that we visited there made at least one non-alc beer. And they're a decade ahead of us on this.
Yeah.
Anyway, and, they take drunk driving, I think, a lot more seriously there.
Which is good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a certain, we're talking about an industry that's maturing, and trying to, maybe, if not repent for, but rein in some of the questionable behavior of the first couple of decades, that maybe this is a good indicator, that when, thought leaders like you are talking about this on your podcast is something that you enjoy. I think it's really, really helpful to get people past, we've all lived through this, the IBU wars, and it's fascinating to me now. Like, I feel like I'm making a non-alc IPA is like the polar opposite of what I was doing 10 years ago, which was trying to make the strongest beer the most drinkable. The most drinkable strong beer you could, and pack the most hop flavor into a 10% beer and make it drink like a pale ale. Here we're doing the opposite. We're trying to pack flavor into something that doesn't have any alcohol.
And what a time to be alive.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a very, very big challenge for us. And there've been some setbacks along the way, but I think it's, it could be a really significant part of our portfolio moving forward.
Well, I'll have to head out to the stores in Jersey.
And I'm not even sure I've said it. It's called safety glasses.
Oh.
Have we even said that?
No.
Safety glasses, IPA and pills. And you'll see it certainly throughout the tri-state area in the very near future, if not already. And then in New England and in the rest of our footprint just behind that.
So I know I originally said, I'm going to need you for 45 minutes, and we're coming up on 90 now. So with that in mind, I've been asking folks on the show the Green Door question, which is, there's a television show called The Good Place, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not.
Barely.
But,
yeah.
Okay. In the final season, they introduce a concept.
Ted Danson is on this show, right?
He is.
American Treasure, Ted Danson.
Yeah. Yes. Andy McDowell's husband. Yes. Or Mary Steenburgen. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Andy McDowell. Jesus. That's this is all the more reason that I should be drinking non-alcoholic beer. They introduced the concept of a green door, where you can walk through it and be anywhere at any point in history.
Oh gosh.
And so if there was a green door on this plane of existence, and this conversation was over, and you could walk through the green door and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
Man, you didn't prepare me for this.
I've been asking this question on the show for like 2 years now.
Oh, is this the part where I say I've never listened to your show before?
Yep, 100%. That's it. That's fine. You're a busy man. You're launching non-alcoholic brands. You have like 19 children. I know how busy you are. It's fine.
Gosh. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
This answer is not necessarily my permanent answer, right?
That's the one that's going to get recorded.
It's the one that's going to get recorded. What brewery or pub would I want to be at? Drinking what and with who?
I love how you're stalling on this, by the way. It's a masterclass in racking the back of your mind while just saying random words. And I'm helping you out here by now by calling you out on this to give you more time to be thinking about it.
So on this trip I just made last month, I visited a really remarkable place, and it felt this way, like I just fell into something that was not possible. And I think this is a little bit of a cop out, because I'm gonna name a place where I just was, but it was incredible, and I recommend it to anyone. The Stiegl Brewery in Salzburg in Austria. They've been making their lagers for almost 600 years. And I will say that I would like to have been in virtually any pub in Salzburg drinking Stiegl with Mozart.
Wow.
During the time of Mozart.
Okay. That's
How
a great
about that?
answer. That's a great answer.
Or any of those great thinkers of that time. If just to see how much beer was a part of that culture.
Yeah. Or how much more prolific he could have been if there were some NA options.
Yeah, maybe. I don't. Are you familiar with that brand Beyond the Radler that they make?
No.
It was really eye-opening to me, the scale of
when you say Stiegl, all I think about is grapefruit juice.
Right. And I happen to love that product myself.
Oh yeah. I mean, as far as like NAs go, or near to, like, what is it, like 2.2%?
Yeah, 2 point something.
Yeah.
We drank a lot of that when we were building our original brewery before we had our own beer to drink. Actually, it was somewhat safe to drink during the afternoon, right?
Sure.
They have just a incredible operation. And this was shocking to me. They make about 1 million hectoliters, which puts them just about the size of like Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
With all Austrian grown ingredients. And in my 20-some year career, I've never even thought of the existence of Austrian malt and hops, because they own that stack. Like there's an Austrian malt industry and an Austrian hop growing industry, and it doesn't even make it out of Austria. Which is something that really impressed me as a person who at least purports to be interested in making New York State grown beers.
Yeah.
Knowing what a challenge that is, to think about the scale. We might make 500 barrels of New York State grown beer in a year. So they're doing 200 times that.
Huh.
No, wait. No, 2,000 times.
Yeah.
200. I'm doing my math wrong. If we made 2 times that, it would be 1,000. And then 200 times that would be 100,000. And then 10 times that would be 1 million. And
okay.
New York State is bigger than Austria.
Yes.
Anyway, they make fantastic beer. They give a great tour, and they are really, really admirable company.
Well, I did Yakima this year for Hop Harvest. It seems to me that
I
should probably try to do Germany next year if possible. So
yeah. Well, I'll give you some pointers and introduce you to some people.
I will ask you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to let you get back to your day. Thank you,
John. Thanks for thinking of me
doing this. And yeah, of course. And I will say, because I've said this before, but your new brewing facility, all of the bells and whistles, all of the superior German engineering, it's just a great spot to go and visit.
Well, we're lucky that this stuff is available at a smaller scale. And it's relatively newly, available to a brewer of our size. And we feel really lucky to be able to try out some of these technologies and see how they apply to this new school of brewing. I think we're really lucky to be able to be a part of the process there. And I think, when a traditional supplier like Steinecker can use their resources to help to solve a problem and do it successfully, then that benefits someone else down the road. And we're interested in being part of the development of the industry for sure, and totally interested in sharing our experiences with others. I think was something that really helped me get to where we were, is the generosity of other people with their knowledge. And none of this needs to be any big secret. I mean, you need great ingredients and airtight practices and repeatability. And we've just invested in some tools that help us be sure that we have that. So anyway, we're really looking forward to this next evolution with these adjacent products, and excited that there seems like there's a market for them. So onward and upward.
I love it. And everybody should go and visit you in person as well.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so ask for safety glasses at your favorite retailers, and they don't have to be strictly beer stores. That's another. Right. There's a whole nother universe of places where these can go that don't require an alcoholic beverage license, which just kind of grows the audience, I think.
I dig it. Thanks again. Man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Just a quick programming note. This week marks the 3rd anniversary of the show. Thanks to everyone who's been listening, and thank you for the support, the encouragement, the feedback, and all of the suggestions. So tell me how the show can improve. Who do you want to hear, and what do you want discussed? Let me know. You can email me. It's John Hall, JOHNHOLL @allaboutbeer.com, or you can share your thoughts on Twitter at John_Hall. All About Beer is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just follow along at All About Beer. And of course, This Week in Rauch Beer is also online. The Facebook group is easy to search, and on Twitter and Instagram, it's at TW Rauch Beer. We're able to bring you the show each week thanks to the companies that want to support independent journalism in the beer space. If you would like to learn more about our surprisingly affordable rates, please reach out to info@allaboutbeer.com. And speaking of that, this episode is brought to you by Pro Brewer. We're bringing original articles to probrewer.com twice a week, covering issues that are important to the beer industry and ones that are aimed at helping breweries of all sizes understand the different facets of the business. Check out our articles on probrewer.com every Tuesday and Thursday, and visit the site daily for other original content and to stay connected with the beer industry. Finally, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And don't forget, go visit allaboutbeer.com. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.